was sprawled on a mound of hay, shotgun cradled in my arms, and my head drooping fiercely from want of sleep, when that first ripple of alarm surged through the duck house. Instinctively, my finger curled on the trigger as I slowly sat upright, blinking at the soft amber glow of the kerosene lamp suspended from the rafter. I heard nothing. Only the breeders, shifting timorously in their pens, and their quacking. I had 2 loads of 4s in the shotgun, and a spare double dose in my pocket, in case of trouble. Fox, skunk, bobcat trouble. I felt good then. I brought the gun up and lined it along the rafter, waiting and praying for a shot. Then I saw movement silhouetted against the rafters, rapid and distorted, and I stared incredulously as 2 pinpoints of sheer fire suddenly loomed down at me. I squinted at the animal for a long moment, and when, an instant later, another appeared directly behind it, and I saw the undulating tail and streak of white running down the center of its breast, I knew the cause of my headaches. Weasels. In 2 nights, 90 ducks lost to these murderers. I was so mad, I didn't think to look at the drop boards and see more weasels scampering over a pitchfork toward me, at least a dozen of them, big ones a foot long, and they hit me at the precise moment I squeezed the trigger. Something tore into my right leg, clawing and biting me so that the shot deflected downward, striking the kerosene lamp. Rivulets of flame coursed along the hay as I fell to the floor, screaming and smashing my fists against the hideous furred body. I saw flesh and blood rip loose as I pulled it off me, and then the duck house became a pyre. For as long as was humanly possible, I tried to smother the flames. I tried despite the fact that weasels were clinging to my clothes and crawling up my back. I could smell the sickening odor of burning fur and hear the piteous lament of the trapped ducks. But I couldn't get them out because I was rolling on the floor, ripping weasels off my face. It was 1954, a day after Hurricane Carol, and we were still without electricity. That's the equivalent of a man in a gun battle with no gun. Incubators die, freshly killed ducks go bad, and all the vermin in the world have a field day in the dark night. Without electricity, the small company which I owned was speeding unalterably toward bankruptcy. I knew it, yet there wasn't a damn thing could be done but pray they'd restore power in sufficient time. My farm was on the east shore of Connecticut, convenient to the hurricane, but somehow, miraculously, it had been spared. Naturally, a few shingles got blown off and a hunk of roofing went flying, but on the main, we were lucky. We, my wife Mary and I. Actually, we were lucky in several respects. Because of the holiday weekend, Labor Day, I'd sold most of my freshly killed ducks. There was damn little left, except some reserve stock and the ducklings to be still in incubation, plus the livestock. We were lucky. Until the weasels, I mean. The first night of the weasel trouble, we were so beat up from trying to keep the roof on the house, I slept right through the frantic quacking that meant 60 dead breeders. Mary broke the news gently the following dawn. "Mike, here's a cup of coffee. You'd better get up." "Time is it?" I mumbled groggily. 6:30. Joe's back from the feed. He's downstairs in the kitchen waiting for what? I said, leaning up on one elbow and sipping the coffee. "More bad news." "You're psychic, Mike." "What?" "Tell me gently." "A lot of dead ducks. Something got into the breeder house last night. Joe found a fair-sized hole," he said. I nodded, gulped the coffee, dressed, and went down to the kitchen to talk with my foreman. Joe Haynes and I had been friends for a long while. Since the Army, to be exact. I knew Joe and Joe's thoughts before he did, I think. He and I and 2 pluckers made it a 4-man operation, with Mary doing the cash registering and bookkeeping. It was a small outfit, only a year and a half old at the time. "Fox," I said, nodding. "Don't think so, Mike. Looks like maybe a big cat of some sort. Maybe a mink or a family of skunks, maybe a weasel. Can't tell for sure. Whatever it was, he went through that house like..." "Let's go," I snapped. "Might as well see the worst now." 30 yards from the house, Joe nodded at the fencing. He speculated some of the wind might have ripped holes along the bottom of the meshing. I suppose I said, "You're right," or something. I don't remember. I was sick at heart. And in my wallet, where it hurt more. All that season we'd had predator trouble, the usual thing, rats, skunk, even a bobcat or 2. I expected to find the usual collection of half-eaten ducks, but I was wrong. Of the 60 dead fowl we'd counted, only 3 had been chewed apart. The balance had been killed for the sheer love of spilling blood. "No lights, Mike," Haynes sighed. "Bastard got in here and had a ball. Kerosene lamp didn't phase him a damn." I nodded dourly. "Let's see where he got in." So we looked for more than an hour. We checked the whole length of the duck house. On our hands and knees, we covered every bit of running floor space. Nothing. Then Haynes took the ladder to the roof and checked there. Nothing. "Come on, Joe," I called finally. "I'll figure something out. We've got other work to do." Rest of the day, I and Joe and the boys got the farm squared away as best we could without electricity. Mary drove into town to plead with the electric company, and they told her there'd be service maybe that evening. Maybe we'd be in business after all. But evening came and the power was still off. I swore upside down I'd hawk my soul for an independent motor generator system. After dinner that night, I walked down to the ducks and checked 6 lanterns I'd hung over the pens. Then I went back to my gun rack. I was still putting on my jacket, figuring it'd be a long night's vigil, sitting in the hay, when one of the hands came charging up. "Mike, something got in the house a few minutes ago." Right when my back was turned, it had come again and ripped the throats of another 30 ducks. And so it was that I was well on my way down the drain. I'm not saying that 90 ducks would break us, but 90 in 2 days. And how many more after that? Feel. How did I feel? I wanted to crawl into the ground and pull the lid over me. So I'd gone down that 3rd night, still no electricity, and stationed myself in a corner of the duck house, the big 12-gauge double cradled in my arms, waiting and praying for a shot. And the murdering devils returned for more, and now I had them lined in my barrels. But it didn't quite work out as I'd planned. Not now, it didn't. Now the barn was a roaring inferno with hundreds of ducks cooking alive, and I was being ripped to pieces by foot-long weasels, their bodies wet with my blood. In the stark reflections of the pyre, I could see them running out of the duck house. I clawed great fistfuls of wet hair from my legs as they piled on the others, already tearing me to pieces. I shrieked as the pain burned my flesh, but I stumbled back to the duck house and found the pitchfork. Then, like some poor demented animal, I began spearing everything that moved before me. I saw the long double-pronged steel gouge through squirming bodies. 1, 2, 4. I was out of my mind with pain and grief, yet I didn't stop skewering them, even as I drove the pitchfork into my own leg to stop them. I was soaked with blood, gushing down my face, blinding me, staggering around like a madman, and shrieking at the top of my lungs, jabbing with that pitchfork until I thought my arms would come off. Behind me, the heat of the Holocaust singed my hair. I could smell burning feathers. I could hear the weird din of roasting live duck, and it sickened me. I turned for a moment and stared at the barn, then turned again and drove the pitchfork into the shining white breast that was smeared with my blood. My hands were torn to pieces every time I stopped to claw at some part of me being attacked. I had to drop the pitchfork in those moments, clubbing and tearing with my bare hands. I'd get one, and another 2 would hit me from behind and start raking my face. Time after time, I'd drop to the riverbank and roll over trying to smother them, but they'd squirm out from under, their fetid breath full in my lungs, fainting like boxers for a new attack. I caught a weasel under his throat and dropped the pitchfork, then held onto his neck with both hands, squeezing until the narrow mouth popped open and the tongue slid between the bloody mouth. I squeezed until his body went limp, then turned and heaved it fully into the fire. The sound of my voice screaming, "Mary!" was like an insane person's, and no doubt I was insane at that point. My body from the skull down felt as though hundreds of hot pokers had been driven into the skin, driven there and held by some devilish horror which I'd never believed existed in real life. And then it happened. I began to feel queasy from loss of blood and the terrible panic in my heart. I couldn't hold the pitchfork, and I couldn't stand. The ground moved up and knocked the wind out of me, and I began rolling. I felt hairy bodies racing over my face. I clawed one from my cheeks and tried shielding my face. My blood The taste of warm human blood excited them still further, and the weasels drew back in a cluster to drink it from my clothing. I felt a hairy tail cross my face, and I opened my mouth and bit solidly on a leg. I heard a squeaking sound in my vagueness, and opened my eyes to see drawn fangs gnashing before me. I lurched and missed and crawled to my knees and began moving away. Vaguely I heard my wife's voice above the roar of the nightmare. I screamed as I fell again, my chin banging against the handle of the pitchfork. But it didn't knock me unconscious. It reminded me I was still in the world of the living, and if I wanted to go on living, I'd have to get up. I did, and the nightmare continued, but there were less of them now, and I could protect myself better now. I was a long time in recovering. 4 months. Plastic surgery and the best of care gave me a face that seemed strange to me. I didn't recognize it, even after they finished restoring my sight. It was the face of a new man, because the old one had been eaten away. They gave me metal fingers for my left hand in exchange for the hand I'd lost, too. But they didn't give me a new memory. The old one still sends me into paroxysms of fear every time someone mentions the duck business. The night I died, slowly by degrees, comes back in all its fantastic horror, and I see the weasels again. And I remember the smell of blood and feathers. It makes me wish they'd have eaten my memory, along with the rest of me.
So I don't normally ask for requests, but if you know any other stories from old pulp magazines that you think are really fun and memorable and you'd like to see me read, please send them to me. Just as long as it's a short story that can fit in a single video. I don't want to do a new ongoing series, but any genre is welcome. Horror, sci-fi, fantasy, intrigue, action, war, whatever. Monsters are a plus, but not a must. And if you enjoyed this exhibit and you want to support the Mutant Museum, please consider donating either on Ko-fi or as a regular Patreon supporter like all of these amazing people, particularly Break System BSC, Michael Fattori, Zachary Snowden-Smith. You can see your own name up here on the very next video for as little as $1 a month. Please also consider following me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, as well as buying one or both of my ebooks. Links are in the description for all of these things, and thanks for being you.